Yo, what's up? Dr. Swole here, MD, bodybuilder, back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about my top 5 bulking foods. I think this is going to be a really fun opinion piece where I'll be giving you some food ideas to try specifically if your goal is bulking or for hard gainers. I put out a poll on my YouTube community tab asking people about their somatotypes, and there's actually a pretty even distribution between ectomorphs, mesomorphs, and endomorphs. Briefly, the definition of the somatotype that I'll be using describes a person's build as well as their ability to gain or lose weight. Ectomorphs tend to have a narrow build and have difficulty gaining weight. Mesomorphs have more of a medium build and they can gain weight or lose weight quite easily. Lastly, endomorphs tend to be on the wider side and have an easier time gaining weight. Now I think the model of the somatotype actually has pretty limited predictive value. However, it is one way to think about your own physiology and how you gain or lose weight. So this video might give you some inspiration if you feel that you're an ectomorph or a hard gainer in that you have more trouble putting on size. Now even if you aren't bulking right now or you don't have trouble gaining weight, I do think this will still be useful for you because it's always handy to have a variety of different foods on hand that have different amounts of calories. This will make it easier for you to actually hit your calorie and macro targets on the fly, especially if a wrench gets thrown into your plans and you end up, say, missing a meal or not having time to fit in your calories. So quick outline for today, I'll be talking about 5 of my favorite muscle building foods that I use especially when I'm bulking. I'll be talking about why I chose them, and the criteria I use are convenience, versatility, and personal preference. I want to emphasize that there really aren't any foods that you absolutely have to eat. So when you're fitting foods into your diet, it's going to come down to a lot of practical factors like these. Lastly, I'll be giving you some tips and tricks that bodybuilders use to incorporate these types of foods into their diet so that they can nail their macros and calorie targets. Last disclaimer is that I'll emphasize that we're going for bodybuilding here, so we're trying to build muscle. We're not talking about health. You should be focusing on whole food sources for the majority of your diet, but there are a lot of other foods that can be used as tools in certain situations to help you meet your needs. All right, the first bulking food that I'm going to talk about is rice cakes. This is one of the most notorious bro bodybuilder foods, but I do find that they have some useful qualities and I end up eating them sometimes when I'm bulking. First of all, they're easy to track. I think this is one of the main reasons bodybuilders like them. They're a pretty simple carb source. There's not much else in them. I'll pull up the macros here, which makes it easy to titrate your carb intake for the day if you need to round out certain numbers. Next, they're a palatable carb source, so they come in sweet and savory options. A lot of people will find something they like, especially if you don't feel that hungry, like you're tired or stressed and really need to get in some calories. Next, they're simple and easy to digest, which makes them handy for that peri-workout period. This doesn't apply to everyone, but for some people, they'll find that they have digestive issues if they have large, complex meals just before their workout or just after. So those are usually my favorite times to eat these. And lastly, they're portable and non-perishable, which just makes them very convenient foods. Sometimes if I don't have time to prep a meal, I'll just grab a protein source and some rice cakes and throw them in my bag. Next up, we've got cheese. So I think this is just a really easy way to layer in calories. Cheese is really handy because it can be added to so many things. You can take sliced or shredded cheese and add it to pasta, eggs, potatoes, salad, sandwiches, wraps. The list goes on. Cheese is also pretty high in protein. I'll just pull up the macros here. Mozzarella cheese, for example, is very high in protein. So for a 100-gram serving, you get 280 calories, 17 grams of fat, and 28 grams of protein. I usually don't use cheese as a standalone protein source since there's a lot of fat that makes it harder to track, but it's definitely something that you can use. Next up is whey protein. I'm sure a lot of you use this already and it's a staple in bodybuilders' diets. Not necessarily that there's anything superior about it, but it's just a simple, convenient source of protein. It's portable, so you can throw some into a shaker cup and bring it in your bag. And the application for bulking or hard gainers is that it might be more palatable than whole food protein sources. A basic principle is that liquid foods are going to be simpler and easier to digest than solid foods. For example, on some days when I'm in a fat loss phase, I will actually substitute my whey protein for solid protein sources, just because it's going to be more filling that way. So when I'm cutting, there are some times when I won't use protein shakes at all, and when I'm bulking, I'll often have 1 or 2 a day. Protein supplements are also handy to track since there's not a lot of carbs or fat in them, so it's an easy way to fill in gaps in your protein intake if you happen to miss some. Next up, we have nuts. I like these because they're an easy portable fat source where I just throw a handful or 2 of blanched or roasted nuts into a Ziploc bag and take them with me. They're very calorie dense, so you can use them to round out your caloric intake if needed. Lastly, nuts are a very healthy fat source, and this is actually something that I would recommend trying to fit into your diet if possible. Let's look at some macros here. So in terms of peanuts, for 100 grams, you get 567 calories, 49 grams of fat, 16 grams of carbs, and 26 grams of protein. Again, like cheese, they do contain protein, although I might not necessarily rely on them as a protein source. Just things to think about if you're vegetarian or don't like eating meat. Last food we're going to talk about today is cereal. This is a fun one to use for bulking. Obviously, it's a pretty calorie-dense carb source, and I think the practical use of this is that it's very simple and palatable, which is useful in that peri-workout period. The other thing about cereal is that it's very versatile in terms of scaling up your calories if you need more. You can do this by choosing different types, so ones that contain more whole grains and fiber would be more filling, and ones that contain simpler carbohydrates are going to be more useful for people who really need to add on more calories. You can also scale up or down the calories depending on what you mix it with. So if you want lower calories, you can go for nut milks like almond milk or skim milk. And if you want higher calories, you can go for 2% whole or even chocolate milk. Lastly, a cool bodybuilder trick that I want to mention is that you can mix it with protein. So to do this, you would just make a regular protein shake and have that with your cereal instead of milk. You'll find that the macros work well this way, and it can be a handy thing to use for your pre or post workout meal. All right, so just to wrap up here, the Hardgainer principles that I wanted to emphasize with these food options today are that you might want to add in some simpler food sources, especially in that peri-workout period. As bodybuilders, our protein intake is going to be more or less set, so you'll add in carbs and fats in order to hit your calorie goals. Lastly, I want to say that these are just ideas for you to try. There's really no right or wrong in terms of what exactly you eat, so ultimately you'll have to find out something that works for you. That's all for now, guys. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and a comment below. I answer every single one of my comments, so you'll definitely hear back from me. Comment of the week is from Suhash Suresh on my last video on carbs, where he mentioned that he checked out my TikTok account. I am on TikTok. My handle's the same as my Instagram. It's at Dr. Swole, at dr_swole, so check me out for daily tips. If you really want to optimize your nutrition, check out my playlist on diet, where I've arranged a few of my videos that really talk about optimizing your diet for muscle growth. Nutrition is a huge part of bodybuilding, so you definitely want to be on top of it. If you haven't already, hit subscribe and make sure you turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. See you next time.